As Australians, we like to celebrate the prosperity and success of our nation. We live in a country of economic opportunity, where hard work and persistence is rewarded by the security of a home. It's part of the Australian dream. But beneath the surface of this rhetoric is a hidden problem which both politicians and civilians alike prefer to ignore rather than face a reality. Tonight, like most nights, over 100,000 people in Australia will not have a home. Over 2.1 million Australians have experienced some form of homelessness at some point in their lives, and over half of those people, approximately 1.4 million, have slept on the streets during this time. However, the majority of people who experience homelessness aren't necessarily excluded from shelter. Each night, an average of 7% of people without a home find themselves on the street. Street dwelling is only the tip of the iceberg of homelessness in Australia. In fact, most people who are without permanent residence find themselves in overcrowded housing, temporarily staying with other households, or in other forms of supported accommodation. The Australian Bureau of Statistics defines homelessness as residing in a dwelling that is inadequate for shelter, having no or limited tenure, and does not allow the person to control or access their space for social reasons. There is also more than meets the eye when it comes to the reasons behind why people become homeless. The majority of people who experience homelessness report financial and housing difficulties as the main reason behind becoming homeless, followed closely by domestic and family violence, causing people to leave secure housing. In situations such as these, often people only require short-term assistance until they are able to stabilise their situation. However, in 2013, over 217,000 people were on waiting lists for public housing nationwide. Due to this shortage of public housing, often people are forced into homelessness as the only available option for them and their families. How do these statistics contradict our socially constructed image of homelessness in Australia? And how does this stereotype of the homeless person affect the way in which Australians in our government respond to the homeless and housing crisis which our country faces? Homelessness is not a topic which most Australians and our politicians want to discuss. Feelings of guilt and shame turn into blame and refusal of accountability, and subsequently there is a widespread avoidance of solutions. Uncomfortable problems such as homelessness require visibility and exposure in order for the conversation to create solutions. While each government level remains reluctant to provide long-term solutions to homelessness, many non-government organisations take on the work of providing shelter and necessities to those experiencing homelessness, and act as advocates to ensure that these communities are connected to relevant services and assistance. This area of human services is particularly difficult to navigate as social workers, not only have to cope with the funding restraints in government guidelines, but also manage the public's perception of homelessness in order to gather community support. As the housing crisis has developed over decades and homelessness has been established as a social norm, overcoming the stigma associated with the homeless community can be as challenging as assisting the people themselves. In order to end homelessness in Australia, it is not enough to only assist those who are already experiencing homelessness. We need to fix the societal systems in place which make people vulnerable to homelessness in order to reduce their chances of experiencing it in the first place. The Australian government needs to accept that the free marketisation of the housing sector over the past few decades has had a direct impact on the increase in homelessness in Australia, and it is our government's responsibility to ensure that all Australians have access to secure and adequate housing. Additionally, we need to ensure that short-term accommodation in the form of public housing is readily available for those who need temporary assistance in times of financial and family difficulties. As a young human services student with no prior experience with homelessness or housing difficulty, the extent of this issue has astonished yet humbled me, and this knowledge has assisted me in the continued development of my own practice framework. I can foresee that I will struggle with the limitations of the organisations and government entities in which I may work, and my motivation to help others may lead myself into compassion fatigue. Bearing this in mind, I will strive to keep myself focused on supporting smaller and more manageable endeavours, and celebrate how these accomplishments make tangible change in the lives of whom I provide service.